What's up, everybody? Welcome back once again to another episode of Axel's Analysis. As always, I'm the man too cheap to make up his own name, so that's still an Axel Mulligan. Fairly decent NXT this week. It didn't live up to the hype of what last week was, obviously, because that was a bigger event. But this week was a good enough show. You know, it wasn't going to set the world alight, but it wasn't bad. We had Rich Brennan, Alex Riley, and Renee Young on commentary this week, which was a bit of a surprise to see because obviously it's normally Brennan, Riley, and Albert as of late. Obviously with Renee moving on to the other announced team, but how they're playing it, I'm not sure. You know, unless they're sort of switching her and Albert around, I'm not sure. But to be fair, she was the shining light of the commentary this week. You know, Brennan, he was lackluster at best. Riley is what Alex Riley is. He's decent enough and still pisses me off at the same time. But and I'd say Renee did a good job. You know, she's obviously had a couple of months working with Phillips and Saxton as what I like to call the main announced team for NXT. And you know, it's done her the world of good. Just working with two probably superior commentators to Riley and Brennan. And it's worked well for her, to be fair, so can't really have too many complaints on that front. Titus O'Neil kicked off the show, which was a nice sort of surprise, really. I like Titus, I like him on the mic, I think he's got brilliant charisma. It's a shame that it's a bit too late in the game for him now to make a bigger impact because he's got everything about him. Decent athlete, as I say, great charisma, brilliant on the mic. He's got presence about him. You know, he's got the look of a champion. But I think he's 37, 38 years old now. Not many people know that, but he's 37, 38 years old, and unfortunately, he's not going to have the time in his career to be able to flourish like a John Cena or Randy Orton or like Roman Reigns will. He basically talks about the NXT guys being on Raw the other week, stealing his spotlight, stealing his time on his show, as he calls it. So he's returning the favour. So he's taking up time on NXT, taking up their time on NXT, taking up the fans' time. And he tells the fans the show is now called NXT US, so obviously NXT Titus. He gets interrupted by Sami Zayn. Sami says Titus is just what NXT needs. A giant buffoon who couldn't win a match to save his life. And he also says, while Titus is busy being beaten up by bunnies, we're stealing the show down here in NXT. And it's quite funny because Sami's one of the ones who's been dressing up as the bunny on Raw and SmackDown. I believe it's been shared between him, Darren Young, and Justin Gabriel. But that's Raw and SmackDown shit that I don't really care about. Neville comes out next, with an interruption. He tells Sami if anyone wants to disrespect NXT, that Adrian will be the one to defend it. So Sami sort of questions him and says, well, just because you're the champion, why should you be the one to defend the show? And Adrian sort of looks quite shiftily and doesn't really know how to answer the question. Tyson Kidd comes out next, and he basically stirs the pot between the two of them. So if Sami was NXT champion, he would have done the same as what Neville did last week, you know, where he pulled the referee through the ropes so that Sami couldn't get the 3 count. And Sami says, you know, morally I wouldn't have done the same thing. And Adrian tells him that's why you'll never be champion. And that gets a big, oh no shit, you didn't just do that sort of thing from the crowd like they do, to add to the drama. Titus tells them both that he doesn't care about either of them. He's here to make a statement, and he says, a statement I will make. Regal comes out and tells Titus that he will get a chance to make his statement in the main event because it's going to be him teaming with Tyson Kidd, taking on Sami Zayn and Adrian Neville, right at the Teddy Long playbook, obviously. So this week's show has been entitled Teddy Regal, and I think anybody who reads the show without anybody who reads the title of the show without listening to it, they'll know why. But it was a decent enough opening segment, you know. It set up the main event and it added to the tension between Zayn and Neville. And I think what we could be looking at moving forward is an Adrian Neville heel turn, which I'm not too upset about because Adrian's gotten a bit stale character-wise. As much as his in-ring work has still been brilliant, his character is not. It's not even phoning it in anymore. To be honest with you, it's just, yeah, I'm the good guy. Look at me, woohoo. Getting boring. Because with Sami, he's got a bit more charisma. He's better on the mic. He's probably better in the ring as well, to be fair. But if you're talking character-wise, his character is much better, and it's more well-rounded than what Adrian's is. So Adrian's going to have to sort of reinvent himself a little bit to keep the interest there in the character, as much as everybody loves Adrian Neville, the wrestler. But we'll see where they go with that moving forward. As I say, it is pointing towards a heel turn, in my opinion, at least. And I'd like to see it, really. I just like to see the British guys, being British myself, I like to see it sort of being changed up a little bit every now and then. You know, like with Regal himself, when he was sort of on the active roster. Good babyface, brilliant heel. Change it up every now and then, just, you know, like when he sort of became the mentor or the manager of the UG Tag Team Champions, and then sort of a year later he's working as a heel. It worked for Regal, it works for most people, you know. First match of the night was Charlotte versus Emma, and Emma got a decent welcome back chant, which was good to see. You know, I like her as a wrestler. I don't like the character, as I've said on numerous occasions. I don't like the fact that all her moves are named like the Emma lot, the Emma sandwich. I don't get it. It's not my kind of thing. It's not my cup of tea. It's a case of you can't please all the people all the time, and generally with WWE you can't please any of the people all the time. So. But there was a decent little match. It served its purpose to get Charlotte over as the champion. She impressed again. She looked really good in the ring. And, you know, as I say with Emma, there aren't many divas as good as her on either the main roster or the NXT roster. There's not many as good as her. So it was good to see that she was the one down there to work with Charlotte and make, you know, not just Charlotte making herself look good, but Emma making Charlotte look good as well. Charlotte won. She hit a neck breaker, and Emma sort of fell onto her knees. And Charlotte flipped over the natural selection 1, 2, 3, and she didn't retain it as an on-title match, but she sort of picked up the win to carry on with her momentum throughout NXT. Hideo Itami was up next in his debut versus Justin Gabriel. And Gabriel must have kind of forgotten that he was a face because he was trying to play up the crowd he must have forgotten that he was a heel because he was playing up the crowd as a face during his entrance. But as soon as he got into the ring, you know, it was general heel work, like controlling the match, controlling the pace of the match, and it was a decent little match. To be fair, it was one of those ones that served its purpose. He was a good choice of opponent, though, I think, because he's a very well-rounded wrestler, much like Hideo Itami is himself. Hideo won the match, obviously, as you would expect. He hit his finisher was a double foot stomp from the top rope, similar to Davey Richards, what he's done for a number of years now. But it seems to have a bit more aggression than what Davey's ever done it with. I mean, speaking from his Ring of Honor days, I've not seen a lot of Davey Richards in TNA. In fact, I've not seen any of Davey Richards in TNA, but in his Ring of Honor days, yeah, he hit it with a fair amount of aggression, but Hideo Itami just fucking nailed it. So he picked up the win with that. And it's good to hear the crowd were actually chanting for Hideo and not Kenta, which I think would have just put a bit of it would have spoiled it a bit. But no, it was good to hear. It's kind of like I was sort of thinking back to when Bray Wyatt debuted on the main roster, and there were a minority of fans, literally, probably less than half a dozen, chanting for Husky Harris. And that's not good for the character, you know. So if you're going to chant for him, chant by their current name or their new name. Don't chant by their old name, because it just spoils it. It spoils the show, spoils the character for everybody else. But the Ascension came into the ring and attacked Hideo. He tried to fend them off, but you know, the numbers getting caught up to him, so to speak. And it ended with Connor hit a chicken wing facebuster to Hideo, and I thought it was quite impressive because I've never seen him use that move before. I've not seen anybody use that move for a little while. I remember Paul London used it. I've seen Dean Ambrose used it in the indie circuit. Obviously, there's other people who have used it as well, but this just seemed to be obviously Beth Phoenix as well, the Glam Slam. Really good move, and it's sort of hit again with a lot of aggression, quite similar to the Glam Slam. And he hit that. Hideo made it up to his feet. They hit the Fallen Man. You know, just sort of set up the feud what was started at Takeover, really, I suppose. If they are going to use a partner for Hideo Itami, I'm not sure who it's going to be. Who it's going to be. There was talk of Funaki, like they mentioned it on the show. I think Alex Riley mentioned that Funaki had been helping out Hideo since he'd been in NXT. So whether they use Funaki or whether they go elsewhere, who knows? We'll see. CJ Parker versus Baron Corbin's next. It was another squash match similar to Takeover, really. I mean, it wasn't quite as much of a squash match. CJ Parker got a few moves in. Baron Corbin actually got a proper entrance this time. There was no sort of jobber entrance, if you will. Not that he was jobbing, obviously, but he won the match with his finisher, which he's called End of Days. And it looks as though he's going to get the build up. That Big E got when he first started in NXT a couple of years back. You know, beating guys in less than a minute and then sort of slowly moving on. And it's going to sound slightly hypocritical of me because I've been sent about the Ascension beating jobbers. The difference is Baron Corbin's been there for 2 weeks, whereas the Ascension were there for a year, squashing guys like that. So as long as Baron doesn't squash guys like that for any more than a couple of months, similar again to Ryback, how he started off on the main roster, just sort of build it up nicely. Don't sort of keep it going like the Ascension were for a year. Just sort of build it up nicely, have longer matches, then go against sort of, CJ Parker's a well-rounded wrestler, I think. He's got the basic fundamentals there. So he's probably a good guy to go against Baron Corbin. But maybe, just sort of show that you can take a bit of a licking and, just sort of progressing nice and gently up the roster. Maybe turn him heel at some stage as well, because he's certainly got the look of a heel. As much as he's over as a face at the moment, he's certainly got the look as a heel. So it's one of those things we're going to have to wait and see what they do with it and where they go with it. Next, we had a recap of Sylvester Lefort versus Enzo Amore. They showed like the still photos from the match that they had at Takeover last week, and when Enzo threw the bucket of the whatever the hell was in it over Marcus Louis. And then after we saw that, there was a video of Enzo and Cass training at the Performance Center. And Enzo gets told by a member of staff, your sister's here. And Cass is like, you haven't got a sister. And in comes Carmella, the girl from the hair salon from a couple of weeks ago. She tells him she got fired from her job because of them. And she wants a job like doing what they do. And Cass says, well, we've already got a receptionist, so sorry, your luck's out. And she says, no, I want to be a fighter, I want to wrestle. And they're sort of saying, I don't think that's such a good idea. And she picks up this big training ball and she throws it at Enzo's gut, and he sold it perfectly. He fell over like a sack of shit. It was brilliant. Carmella says she'll be back tomorrow to start her training, and Cass is like, oh shit, shit's getting real kind of thing. Enzo tells him not to post the video. He does it anyway. Typical Cass. But it looks like we're going to have a new female wrestler on the roster, being trained up, sort of, kayfabe trained up by Cass and Enzo. It wasn't quite on par humour-wise as what their segments normally are, but, it was still quite good at the same time. Served its purpose. Again, there's a lot of stuff on the show that did, just served its purpose. It didn't excel the show. It didn't drag down the overall quality of the show. But it still gave me a laugh when Enzo went down holding his gut, like, like sort of writhing around in pain. It was quite funny. The main event was up next. It was Titus and Tyson Kidd, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, versus Adrian, Neville, and Sami Zayn. It started off with Zayn and Neville trying to one up one another a lot. Sami hit a standard moonsault, and Rich Brennan practically just fucking jizzed, basically. he's sort of like, he's just stolen one of Neville's moves, and it was just like, yeah, what did you expect? You know, it was always on the cards. It was always going to happen. You know, he could have reacted much better to it than what he did. I think it was he blew it up and thought it was going to be bigger than what it actually was. You know, the crowd sort of ate it up because they chanted better than Neville or better than Adrian or whichever it was they chanted. I don't remember now, but. And then the next one pissed me off, where a couple of minutes later, Adrian's in the ring and he hits a sorry, what was it? I'm just reading my notes. He hit a standing corkscrew moonsault, and he sort of landed on Tyson's legs and tried pinning him. Obviously didn't get it. But Brennan, he got the name of the move wrong. He called it a standing shooting star press. It wasn't. It was a standing corkscrew moonsault. Learn your moves, Rich Brennan. You know, you were trained as a commentator by Booker T down in his territory that he's got out in the States, in Texas and Houston. Learn your moves, mate, because you're not going to progress. You're just going to end up like in the same place where Tony Dawson was, and that was out the door. The next sort of moment of one-upsmanship, this was sort of to take it back to TakeOver, not from something what happened on this show. Neville put Kid over the top rope on the entrance ramp side of the ring. He hit the ropes on the opposite side of the ring, and as he was going to sort of dive through the ropes, Zayn stopped him and he hit an asside moonsault. The way he does it off of his knee, off the backs of his knees or his hamstrings, hit an asside moonsault onto Tyson Kidd, and it was just sort of to go back to what happened at TakeOver, where Neville did the same, where he landed on Breeze and Kidd. Nice little moment there, because Zayn was just looking at, yep, I did it better than you. And it was more impressive, I would say, because of how he sort of springboards off of the ropes, whereas Neville springboards off of his feet. Zayn comes off, like, as I say, the backs of his knees or his hamstrings. And it looks like a more difficult move to execute, I would say. End of the match, Neville and Kidd were legal in the ring. Neville took down Kidd with a running drop kick and followed it up with a standing shooting star press. He went for a cover, which Titus broke up. Sami knocked Titus from the ring. The ref, sort of, Sean Bennett, he tried pulling Sami out of the ring. Eventually got him out of the ring, but as he did, Neville went up to the top rope to hit the red arrow. Titus pushed him off the top rope, and Tyson caught him with a knee to the face, rolled him up, 1, 2, 3. End of the match, and we've got like a little argument going on between Neville and Zayn to end the show, but Zayn sort of ended it like, no, whatever, you know, it's alright, whatever, don't worry about it. But you could tell he was pissed off, obviously. I would be as well. Excuse me. Overall rating, I've written down a 7, but I think I'm going to change it to a 6.5 just because it wasn't quite a 7. You know, it was good, but it's not as good as what I initially thought when I first watched it. But no, 6.5 out of 10 I've got. Next week, it was announced that we got the rematch for the NXT Tag Team titles between Kalisto Sakara and The Ascension, which again should be a good match, you know. Decent match at TakeOver last week. I'm hoping it a main event the show, but you know, we'll see where they, you know, what they do with it. The news this week, I've actually got quite a lot of news here. There was a great interview up on WWE.com with what they're calling the NXT fight. You've got Kevin Steen, Sami Zayn, Adrian Neville, Prince Devitt, and Hideo Itami. Hideo didn't really say much, I'll tell you that now. But just talking about their backgrounds, how they got to NXT, what they think will be the next crop of indie guys to get to the WWE. There's guys mentioned like Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, like, you know, the names that you'd expect to hear mentioned. Johnny Gargano, you know, some guys that you know think could fit in quite well, especially Kyle O'Reilly. I mean, I just finished watching the Red Dragon DVD, Enter the Red Dragon, and some of the matches that Kyle O'Reilly has had in Ring of Honor, absolutely brilliant. And I wouldn't mind seeing him come up with Bobby Fish, actually, because as a tag team, I would say between them and the Young Bucks are the best in the world at the moment. You know, a lot of people sort of talk about the Wyatt family, the Usos, the Dust Brothers. Tune into Ring of Honor. I mean, this week we saw, on Ring of Honor, it was the Briscoes versus the Young Bucks, and I would say it's the best tag team match I've seen in at least 5 years. Absolutely phenomenal match. And, you know, obviously this isn't a Ring of Honor podcast. I'll leave that to the guys that do those sort of things. But, you know, it's just a phenomenal match. And anybody who watches Ring of Honor, if you've not seen it, just make sure you check it out. Because even the first match, AJ Styles versus Kyle O'Reilly, was absolutely brilliant. And Bobby Fish did a brilliant job at ringside as well. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. That's Ring of Honor talk. That's not NXT. I've also read the next live special is expected to be in December. I would say probably around Christmas time. Again, I'd imagine that's going to be an NXT takeover, and then whatever name added on to the end of it. Yeah, so that's, as I say, that's for December. There were no NXT guys on Raw or SmackDown this week, but they were all backstage at both shows. You know, the same crop as what's been there all like the last couple of weeks. You know, the Ascension, Neville, Zayn, and Tyler Breeze. Basically, they did do a couple of dark matches before SmackDown, I believe it was. Kofi Kingston defeated Tyler Breeze, and Neville and Zayn defeated the Ascension. So, you know, all 5 guys got used to some degree, which is obviously good to see. But the reason that they didn't get used on the main shows is because of Night of Champions, which is tonight. I'm recording this on Sunday, so tonight. There was the one other bit of news I read as well is the partnership that we've got on the main roster between The Miz and Damien Sandow. Apparently at some stage they're going to look to put Tyler Breeze in there as well. Hopefully I hope they don't fuck it up, because I can just see them fucking it up. You know how WWE work with these kind of things. On to the birthdays. There's a fair few here actually. Teddy Long, September the 15th, Teddy Long 67. September the 16th. I don't know if he actually worked for the WWE, but I know he worked for WCCW as well. Bill Irwin, he was a brilliant wrestler. Did a lot of work in WCCW, had some really good matches, had some good partnerships with like the Von Erichs. He turned 60. September the 17th, Jim Cornette turned 53. I actually thought he was a few years older than that, like sort of talking 10, 15 years, well not 15 years older, but I thought he was at least late 50s, early 60s. September 18th would have been the birthday of WWE Hall of Famer James Dudley. He passed away some years back now, but he would have been 103. Another guy who didn't work for the WWE as well, but definitely worth mentioning, Billy Robinson from Manchester in England. He would have turned 75. He passed away earlier this year. September the 19th, Gerald Briscoe, 68, Hall of Famer. Obviously with his brother Jack. Eva Marie turned 30 and Renee Young turned 29. September the 20th, so yesterday, Greg the Hammer Valentine, another Hall of Famer, turned 63. Joel Gertner, again a guy who didn't work for the WWE but worked for ECW, and I absolutely love his promo work. Absolutely brilliant. You know, the way he announced the Dudley Boys in ECW was just brilliant. He put himself over, he put them over, and he got the crowd to give them shit basically. And he just did it so perfectly. It was brilliant. One of my favourite lines of his was, "I'm young, I'm hung, and I'm skilled with my tongue." Brilliant. Because he's not, you know, he called himself the quintessential stud muffin, and he wasn't a stud muffin whatsoever. But he put himself over as one, and the crowd loved it, especially when he was a face after his work with the Dudley Boys when they went to the WWE. But no, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. He was a good manager as well, to be fair, and a good commentator. And Double A Arn Anderson, 56, on the 20th September. Today, September 21st, Jack Briscoe, mentioned just now, he would have turned 73, passed away a few years back. Ricky Morton from the Rock and Roll Express, 58. And Ivelisse Velez, formerly known as NXT diva Sophia Cortez, she turned 27. And I was always quite surprised when she got released, because she was like probably the best wrestler that they had out of the women's roster at the time on NXT. It just didn't make any sense to me. Didn't make any sense to anyone I spoke to about it. And then TNA didn't sign her up either when they had the chance. That's a ball drop right there. This week's Grappling Great. I said I was going to either do Buddy Rogers or Pat O'Connor. I've gone for Pat O'Connor. Simply because one of the best amateur to professional wrestler transitions there's ever been. I would say Kurt Angle's probably the standout one, but Pat O'Connor's not too far behind, so I've gone with Pat O'Connor this week. Born Patrick John O'Connor on the 22nd of August 1924 in, I'm going to try and pronounce this right, Retihi, New Zealand. And if I pronounce that wrong, somebody tell me how it's pronounced, because I haven't got a fucking clue. He represented New Zealand at the 1948 Pan American Games, and in 1949 and 1950 won the Amateur New Zealand Heavyweight Championship. His win in 1949 earned him entry into the 1950 British Empire Games. This is all amateur based. His 1949 win earned him entry into the 1950 British the British Empire Games in Auckland, and he won the silver medal. So, obviously, decent accomplishment there. Moved into professional wrestling, and in 1955, he and Roy McClarty won the Chicago version of the NWA World Tag Team Championship. That was for Jim Crockett Promotions. They held that title for 11 months. Later that year, he went on to work for Maple Leaf Wrestling. That's 1956, and he won the NWA British Empire Heavyweight Championship, which he eventually lost to Gene Kiniski. O'Connor won the NWA World Championship from Dick Hutton on January the 9th, 1959. He held the title for 2.5 years, eventually losing it to Buddy Rogers on the 30th of June 1961. You can find the match on YouTube. Brilliant match, to be fair. I always thought 2 out of 3 falls, as most championship matches were back then. And it's also featured on the History of the World Heavyweight Championship DVD that the WWE put out about 4 or 5 years ago. In 1960, while he was the NWA champion, he was also recognised as the first ever AWA World Heavyweight Champion, but he never defended the belt, and after 90 days of not defending, he was stripped of it by Vern Gagne, and Vern Gagne was then announced as the new champion. He won the AWA World Tag Team Championships with Wilbur Snyder, defeating Larry Hennig and Harley Race in November 1967. And they lost the titles less than a month later to Mitsu Arakawa and Dr. Motto. O'Connor died on the 16th of August 1990 from cancer, aged 65. And he was inducted into the following Hall of Fame: the NWA Hall of Fame in 2011, Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2007, St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2007 as well, the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame in 1997, and he's also a member of the Stampede Wrestling Hall of Fame. So, again, a little background there on Pat O'Connor for you. I managed to pick up a DVD online of some old Pat O'Connor matches, and there was one on there with Randy Orton's grandfather, Bob Orton Sr. Brilliant match. I don't really remember too many of the others that were on there. It was just because I knew who Bob Orton was, that's why it stood out in my mind. But brilliant match. I do try to get on and watch as many of these older guys as I can, because doing these little sort of grappling great segments, it is nice to sort of know a little background of the guys as wrestlers as well. And Pat O'Connor was a brilliant wrestler. Probably only seen a dozen or so matches of his, but from what I could tell from those matches, he was a phenomenal wrestler. And obviously, the amount of Hall of Fame that he's been inducted into sort of says something about him as a wrestler, and the impact that he made on the business. That's the end of the show. So as always, make sure you look out for me on Twitter at Get Me Teeth Back In, at Axel Mulligan. You can check out the Axel Analysis page on Twitter, which is at Axel's Analysis, and also search for it on Facebook. Shoutouts, as always, Tim Vicious, at Tim_Vicious. Check him out on YouTube for his show Vicious Rants, where he reviews Raws and pay-per-views. The Sunday Segway podcast, which I've literally just finished recording before doing this. I'm now into the semi-final of the Beat Your Clock Challenge, where I'll face either Shugs or Tim himself, so I'm looking forward to that. That'll be in a few weeks' time. You can find the Sunday Segway podcast on YouTube, Podomatic, iTunes, and Stitcher Radio. James Powers at James Powers 33. Check out James's Wrestling Ramble on YouTube, Podomatic, and Mixcloud. Tony Walker at Tony_Walker. check out the Wrestling Matters podcast. You can find the page on Twitter at WM Podcast. Check it out on YouTube, Podomatic, and iTunes. If you listen to that and the segue on iTunes, make sure you give them a rating. At PW Smart Talk and Pro Wrestling Smart Talk on Facebook, and at Wrestling Rambles, and check out WrestlingRambles.com. And I will see you again next week.